the equip questions. This is on page 19. 19. Equip questions 1 through 3, and then engage 1. So, what 3 things did Dr. Sire's Socratic approach? You know, we did that one yesterday.
Yeah.
We did that one yesterday. So, why is it illogical to affirm that Western logic is different from Eastern logic? Yes.
All logic is logic in any way, like regardless of how you spin it. It's just either correct or incorrect. There is no like this is your type of logic and this is my type of logic. Like logic is logic and you're either right or wrong.
Okay, so that's true, but there's another reason. Yes.
Eastern is either or, and Western is both and. Western, it's either both and or.
Right. So, or either or, the either or is not right. So because you have to use Western logic to do it, right? The either or wins out. So Eastern logic answers Western logic. Because Eastern logic is both and, right? So and so I can't remember the exact quote that he said. So what you're telling me, it is either one or the other, and what the guy said? Well, it does seem like the Western logic wins out, right? So yeah, you have to use Western logic to explain Eastern. Why should people be skeptical of David Hume's skepticism?
Tells us that only truth can be proved logically, and we don't know whether
Okay. Yes.
The way he was his skepticism in 2 conditions, that he was convinced of the absolute truth with those 2 conditions, but following his conditions of verifiability, it itself isn't true by definition, nor verifiable by the senses, which were his 2 conditions. And so it ended up it doesn't work out.
It's
So
self-defeating.
by his own
Definition of his
argument, it is meaningless, right?
Yeah.
By his own argument. This is the way I put it. Hume tries to prove too much because his method of discovering meaningful proposition it excludes too much. So the premise that unless something is true by definition or empirically by science, provable, is itself not meaningful, and it is self-defeating at the same time. Now, I want to see. So let's open up. By the way, you're going to have to. Let me give you. You're going to have to explain either Hume's argument or Kant's argument on your next test. So you need to decide which one. You get a choice, but you need to understand it thoroughly. So if reading over these again, I would suggest that you read over both of them. Now, because Kant's let's open to page 59. Because Kant's argument is a little more nuanced. I read this aloud to you so I can help you understand it a little bit. This is one of the places where it's possible that your brain might slow down a little bit. So here we go. Immanuel Kant. By the way, I've always put this on YouTube, and I probably never should. My junior year, I roomed with in college. I roomed with my three best friends, one of whom was my very best friend. And they were all basketball players, and at that point, I was the basketball manager. And because I played 1 year, I was like, I'm not doing this in college. They put up on the door, there was a death list on the door. And Immanuel Kant they were taking philosophy. I already taking this on. They were taking philosophy, and they put Immanuel Kant on the death list because it was so hard to. So here we go. Immanuel Kant's impact has been even more devastating to the Christian worldview than David Hume's. For if Kant's philosophy is right, then there is no way to know anything about the real world, even empirically verifiable things. Why? Because according to Kant, the structure of your senses and your mind forms all sense data. So you never really know the thing in itself. You only know the thing to you after your mind and senses form it. In other words, you can't trust your mind and your senses. It's what you see is different what somebody else sees. Yes.
I think we talked about this a little bit in history. It's like where you're in a cave and there's a light and you're watching it on the wall, but you don't quite know what's happening because you're facing away from it, but you're only seeing it like shadows on the wall. Is it like that?
Yeah. Something like that. You can't know the thing for real. Just what your mind is telling you.
Yeah.
But that's not reality. Okay.
Yeah.
This was like he tried to do it. And it was
Okay.
like the least.
Can we
Yeah,
keep
sorry.
reading that? Okay, that's okay. Okay, so only that. So you only that because your mind is forming sense data you're getting from the tree. You really don't know the tree in itself. You only know that the phenomenon your mind categorizes about the tree. In short, you can't know the real tree in itself, only the tree that as it appears to you. Phew. Why is it that the average person on the street doesn't doubt what he sees with his own two eyes, but supposedly brilliant philosophers do? The more we study philosophy, the more we are convinced of this. If you want to make the obvious seem obscure, just let a philosopher get a hold of it. Nevertheless, we can't avoid studying philosophy because, as C.S. Lewis said, good philosophy must exist, if for no other reason, because bad philosophy needs to be answered. Kant's philosophy is bad philosophy, yet it has convinced many people that there is an unbridgeable gulf between them and the real world, that there's no way you can get any reliable knowledge about the world about what the world is like, really like. Wow. Needed more sleep last night. Much less what God is really like. According to Kant, we are locked in complete agnosticism about the real world. We don't know, and we can't know. Thankfully, there's a simple answer to all of this, the Roadrunner tactic. Kant commits the same error as Hume. He violates saying the law of non-contradiction. He contradicts his own premise by saying that no one can know the real world while he claims to know something about it, namely that the real world is unknowable. So he's saying you can't know. But at the same time, he's saying, but I do. Does that make sense? So he knows something. He knows that we can't know. But he just said you can't know anything. Does that make sense? That's why it's self-defeating. So In effect, Kant says that the truth about the real world is that there are no truths about the real world. But that is a truth. If he's right, that is a truth about the real world. Since these self-defeating statements can stump even the sharpest minds, let's look at Kant's error another way. Kant is also making a logical fallacy called the nothing but fallacy. This is a fallacy because nothing but statements imply more than knowledge. Kant says he knows that data that gets to the brain is nothing but phenomena. But in order to know this, he would have to be able to see more than just the phenomena. In other words, in order to differentiate one thing from another thing, you have to be able to perceive where one ends and the other begins. For example, if you put a white piece of paper on a black desk, the only way you can tell where the paper ends is by seeing some of the desk that borders it. The contrast between the paper and the desk allowed you to see the boundaries of the paper. Likewise, in order for Kant to differentiate the thing in the real world from that which his mind perceives, he would have to be able to see both. But this is exactly what he says cannot be done. He says only the phenomena in the mind can be known, not the it's called the noumena, his term for the real world, not the real world. If there's no way to distinguish between the phenomena and the noumena, then you can't see how they might differ. And if you can't see how they might differ, then it makes much more sense to assume that they are the same. In other words, that the idea in your mind accurately represents the thing in the real world. What we are saying is that you really do know the thing inside. You really do know the tree you are seeing because it is being impressed on your mind through your senses. In other words, Kant was wrong. Your mind doesn't mold the tree molds your mind. Just think about a wax seal. It is not the wax that impresses the seal, it is the seal that impresses the wax. There's no gulf between your mind and the real world. In fact, your senses are your windows to the world. And senses, like windows, are that through which we look at the outside world. They are not that at which we are looking. In philosophy class, Norm, was teaching, in a philosophy class I was teaching, I pointed out the flaws in Kant's philosophy this way. I said, first, if Kant claims that he can't know anything about the real world, the thing in itself, then how does he know the real world is there? And second, his view is self-defeating because he claims that you can't know anything about the real world while asserting that he knows that the real world is unknowable. One student blurted out, "No, it can't be that easy, Dr. Geisler. You can't destroy the central tenet of the last 100+ years of philosophical thought in just a couple of simple sentences." Quoting my favorite source, the Reader's Digest, I responded, "That's what happens when a beautiful theory meets a brutal gang of facts." Besides, whoever said that refutation has to be complex? If someone makes a simple mistake, it only takes a simple correction to point it out. There's nothing complex about the Roadrunner. He's simply fast and effective. So Hume and Kant are wrong. So what? Since Hume and Kant violate the law of non-contradiction, their attempts to destroy all religious truths fail. However, just because Hume and Kant are wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have positive evidence for, say, the existence of God. The Roadrunner tactic can only reveal that the proposition is false. It doesn't provide positive evidence that the particular claim is true. So, is it true that a theistic God exists? Is there any knowable evidence that will give us reasonable certainty one way or the other? Is there such a thing as knowable evidence for an unseen God? answered those questions, we need to investigate how truth itself can be done. So from here then, I want you to, we have 5 minutes? Okay, so your homework is going to be equip 4 and 5. And then you're gonna read pages 61 through 69. And do equip 6 and 7. So I'll write all of that down up here.
James? Pass the paper.
61 to 69. And then equip 4 through 7. I know that's a lot of homework, and we can get started now in the last few minutes, but we have to do it that way.